Louisa Duffy lives in Queensland but works in New South Wales, and yet the two locations are only 5 minutes apart.
As the owner of a childcare centre, she has been permitted to cross the border throughout the pandemic, but that all changed when the Queensland Premier classed childcare workers as non-essential. Now Louisa must rent an apartment just 5 minutes from her house, but it's across the border, it's in New South Wales, if she hopes to keep her business afloat. She joins us now from outside her home. Louisa, thanks for joining us. It's a pretty tough, desperate situation, this, isn't it?
Oh, Karl and Ali, it is beyond words right now. We are, and not just myself, but the whole border community is doing it really tough. We cannot work, we cannot come home, our livelihoods are being affected. And the saddest part of it at all is that no one seems to be listening to us.
So describe what is happening in relation to, I mean, how does it even work up there, your centre now, with parents, kids, wherever they work, and how does it function?
Sure. Okay, so I have a childcare centre in Tweed Heads which caters for essential workers, especially right now in lockdown, of Queensland and New South Wales people. I have roughly 19 staff that we employ, and my co-owner lives in New South Wales, and I've lived in Queensland for 30 years. So I make that commute every day. And what the problem is now is that because we're in a lockdown, we are deemed essential. So we have to stay open, and we have to provide care for essential families. So Queensland families and New South Wales families. But I cannot get to my workplace to offer that care because if I do, I can't come home because I'm not essential.
What
so the
service
is essential, but the workers are not essential. This is where it just gets madness. And so your husband, he works in Queensland. So you've had to move across. You're going to have to move across the border to New South Wales because you can get into New South Wales, okay?
I do.
Your 6-year-old daughter goes to school in New South Wales, so she's going to come with you. But your husband has to stay 5 minutes away, and you're not going to be able to see each other. Because otherwise he can't go to work because he works in Queensland.
I needed to whiteboard that.
All right. Here we go.
But that's how ridiculous.
I know,
that's
right?
how ridiculous.
We need to web it. I know, it is crazy. And the problem is that childcare workers need to be essential. We cannot do our job from home. We cannot do our jobs via Zoom. We are irreplaceable. We need to be on the floor with those children and families supporting them. There is no other way. So I can't understand the rationale behind not making us an essential worker. How do I care for a baby via Zoom? How do I give them their bottles? How do I do their daily care routines? How do I supervise children in the yard?
Right on.
How do I implement programs for all these children? I can't do that. And the children need us there these days. They need consistency. Their lives with COVID have been turned upside down. Families need us to be there consistently. So this call by the government, to me, is totally irrational and totally lacks any type of common sense. We need to be with our families and children.
All right. So I mean, who is making representations for you? Are you able to get any clarity on whether or not that might change, whether the Queensland government is looking at it?
Well, that's the great question. We have had really no conversation about that. No one's feeding anything back to us. We are begging for the border bubble to be reinstated, even if it's tighter, even if it's just the Tweed Shire. Just allow people from Queensland to work in New South Wales and to be able to come home. Because what's going to happen is I have to move away. I can't come home. And I'm leaving a freedom in Queensland that I've worked hard to maintain. And I have to now go and live in lockdown just so I can save my livelihood and, you know, keep my daughter's life functional and consistent.
You make a compelling case, Louisa.
I have to say goodbye to my husband.
You make a compelling case.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time today, and we'll make some calls for you as well. And
you're welcome.
Yeah. Good on you. Just
and
ahead.
Thank you for giving us this time.
Pleasure. Pleasure. It's our pleasure. I mean, the inconsistencies are hard to live with, aren't they?
We've just got to fix those issues with all those border towns. We saw it with Victoria and New South Wales before. We're seeing it here.
The difference here is, and it's only a small difference, but it's the population numbers. This is a huge population base on that Queensland-New South Wales border. On the borders between Victoria and New South Wales, for example, they were smaller numbers and it was inconsistent and it was awful for them. But there are big numbers here on the Queensland-New South Wales border, huge. So they're going to have to do something about it.
Yeah, and these are people who always consider themselves kind of one town, isn't it?
Yeah,
Now all of a sudden
completely.
divided because of a pandemic.